What is, objectively, the best official level in Geometry Dash? I thought I'm the first person to pose this question, although I think I will be the last.
Any worthwhile question has been asked before.
And yes, I'm free next Wednesday night, wink. I don't know if you know this, it's a rare bit of information, but Geometry Dash is a game? Which means it involves a level of design, like a level of level design. And while preferences over stages abound, some people like dire dogs, there is such a thing as objective analysis, a way to understand how levels were probably created,
based on their methods to communicate the rules of the game without relying on explicit explanation. No one reads the manuals, we just look at the cool pictures. Look, Mario's going wahoo!
Categorically, this type of communication is exclusive to games as a medium, but also extremely tricky to execute because it hinges on predicting player behaviors around the established mechanics. This a long-winded way to say,
what the hell is GD supposed to be?
A rhythm game? A platformer? A Souls-like? All hard games are Souls-like now, that's how loose the definition's getting, so I guess also a Souls-like now? Okay, so if your answer wasn't rhythm platformer, you're wrong, considering 2.2, or play the game muted because you might as well ignore the music with how thoroughly synced most of these custom levels are. Being an uncommon genre as well as a hybrid between two others, it does lead to wonder which elements from either should shape the design criteria. Now, thankfully, we don't have to do that because Robtop already did. It's more a matter of organizing what works and doesn't work in its levels to begin figuring out an objective approach to evaluate the main game's 22 levels. So, my ideas for what good gameplay in Geometry Dash is for official levels consist of 4 bases: music timing, pattern usage, visual theme, and mechanical efficiency. Music timing refers to how closely the music resembles the player's successful input, the timing of the clicks, the musical elements to focus on at any given time, as well as how recurrently the musical elements are represented to the music in intuitive ways. Pattern usage is closely tied and rather important, being that music is naturally a set of repeating patterns, so should the gameplay. However, while the input must remain similar or equal, the visual aspect changing is ideal to keep the experience fresh, otherwise it gets repetitive. Keep the positive result from catching onto the pattern, but change the feel of the execution. If you're making the players react to a downbeat twice, that is the first beat in the time signature, then you should probably keep this action going for at least the rest of the musical phrase. If you don't get this, that is completely fine, do not worry, it will be much more clearer when I actually get into analyzing a level. A good example of a destructive pattern is ignoring the music when the design previously didn't, or alcoholism. Visual theme is as simple as it gets. Although not all levels have the fortune of being created with the modern tools in 2.0 onwards, their ability to come together with the tools available at the time to develop a sort of personality will be considered. Blue counts as a theme, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. And finally, mechanical efficiency refers to the level's ability and effectiveness to showcase and teach players about the new mechanics, show potential challenges to them, and slowly ramp up the difficulty of the obstacles by repeatedly using them in creative ways. Being that official levels are most players' introductions to the game, they will serve as a direct tutorial, so if levels do a bad job at introducing mechanics, whether they are the games or custom made for the level, points will be deducted. I should also mention this criteria is not exactly the same as it is for custom levels, since custom levels don't have to stick as evidently to teaching the game's mechanics and stuff. Like, incredibly unintuitive stuff from custom levels is super fun. A fine example is just how most custom levels now do UFO segments, which is completely different to the intended usage of the mechanic, but it is more fun, so, you know, it's fine. They are allowed more slack, revolving the elements they decide to use or the gameplay they decide to go for. The only element I feel that custom levels use and official ones don't but should is orbs with the ship, which I think could easily fly in official levels. Also, orbs on the ground, they get used once and should get more uses. Instead of explaining away, how about I give you examples by going over the one level that follows absolutely none of these pillars, what I consider to be objectively the worst level in Geometry Dash. Enter Geometrical Dominator. Goodness gracious! For as bright and colorful as this level's decorations are, and the occasional fun moments, everything about this level from a design perspective is disastrous? And I'm talking outside of the level looking dated because the community got lit.
It's an awful introduction to moving obstacles,
as they are exclusively used for reaction time-based challenges. Memorization. This concept will come up periodically,
as having to memorize the flow of a level due to low readability is a giant
issue many levels have. And of course, we have to refer to this bit with the colorful blocks that appear shortly before you have to jump. I understand there's clue sparks, but the detail is so small and quick that memorizing the layout is just easier. Mind you, not all memorization is bad. Take muscle memory, it ends up playing a large role in beating any level, but that's a little more unconscious than deliberately trying to remember when you jump or don't. This is a blatant disruption of the pattern usage pillar. One of many. I wish this infamous segment was the only awful feature of this level. Not only does this issue extend throughout to almost every instance of a moving object,
but the way it's taught to players is practically non-existent because it is an arrow.
Robtop put an arrow on a gap to hint towards the first moving objects in the level. As with earlier, arrows have their positives. They are a great method to foreshadow movements or signify directions, but they function better as a secondary tell,
as you may note during this portion in cycles, which will be discussed sooner or later. While introducing the ball game mode, there's this massive arrow pointing up.
You might argue this is a warning, but
I'll place my bets on the giant, unpassable wall that players will have no option but to try tapping or clicking to avoid, at which point the arrow becomes a helper to understand what just happened.
It's not an arrow of go up here, it's an arrow you just went up here.
Now compare that example to this random arrow that signifies drop down.
On the matter of failing completely to introduce a mechanic, guess which game mode's first appearance is butchered to hell and beyond? The intended logic here is for players to only tap briefly to realize their jump isn't as high as usual, only to encounter this rainbow arc that indirectly hints towards longer presses yielding longer jumps. Naturally then, the next attempt might look something like this. You've just indirectly instilled on the player that full jumps are good and small jumps are bad. Because not only would this successfully work, but you even get style points for skipping this purple orb. Robtop's only way to teach players that full jumps aren't always viable is through overhead obstacles, where the player would crash if they jump too high.
There is never a reason to small hop, leading to unvaried gameplay that doesn't teach the mechanic satisfactorily.
I do give credit to the coins for being located in places where your grasp of the mechanic must be greater than the game has let on yet, but their challenge is absent, as are with many coins in the game, but that's a big problem for another video which we'll just discuss by proxy. Here's something cool about this level. It's the first official level introducing a mechanic that isn't hard-coded. Before now, if an update put in ramps, you'd get a ramp level. If the update added mirror portals, you'd get a mirror level. But now GD is a game engine, I guess, and although some people's deprivation had yet to come forth, we did know things such as these diamonds were doable. My favorite part about them is how they're introduced, used, and discarded all in a matter of 3 seconds! With 3 total appearances, one of which is in the way so it instantly becomes irrelevant. Hey, remember those first 2 random moving platforms? Now, you're picturing the random moving platform at the very end. I hardly need to tell you how incompetent it is. You know what would be cool? If this awesome diamond was used to activate him, thus persuading the player into jumping here instead of making an arrow, and then they can be placed later to explain several pointless moving objects so they actually make sense? What's the point of introducing a mechanic you don't develop, let alone use? I officially hate this level. Let's talk about the music sync. This rhythm game should have the layout and music work in tandem, right? Right? What's this big and clown nose do? Oh, I get it. You're calling me a clown. How funny. Both the segments we primarily discussed already have problems adhering to the music, to the point where the level's only instances of consistently following an element in the song is when orbs are involved. While it is true that not all expected inputs must land on a melody, they must land on a recognizable element, and Geometrical Dominator sadly misses this recurrently. I could blame the music because it has many abstract elements that don't adhere to the idea of a melody as it is, but I think I'd rather blame Robtop for not figuring out how to deal with this issue. Now, if you don't understand what the issue is, you can get an easy feel for it by watching the level, but only when the players have tapped. What exactly is the level following here? I guess you can propose the cube at the beginning follows the electric sound, but it begins falling apart during the robot. Every game mode has a different way to map movements effectively. For the cube, any tapping or landing you do to any musical element is enough to convey the music, whereas the bot should focus more on mapping inputs to held musical elements. Allow me to show you the end of the second robot portion to highlight the mismanagement. The melody here clearly conveys a combination of notes that are all held for varying timing, yet the focus is implicitly placed instead on the repeating pattern you can hear in the back of the song, rather than the prevalent element. All because this was the focus before and after the segment. I will note a game mode change is an easy way to signify a change to musical focus, one which I believe even custom levels should use more often, but I digress. For the record, the Ball and Spider both can work similarly to the cube for timing, though we'll later see some particularly good uses of these game modes. The ship should follow the music like an oscillator by making the player go higher on pitch increases and vice versa, something that this level manages to do on the second ship segment but fumbles during the first. The wave ideally should also use a binary format, holding on change and stop holding on the next change, while the UFO... Oh boy, the UFO. UFO gameplay, hereby to be called UFO gameplay, can be incredibly varied in its mapping to the music. The natural bouncy style and gravity of the mode works ideally for percussion elements, but unlike all the other modes where creative and alternate approaches to them have been established first, the UFO change in focus comes a lot more natural thanks to the existence of a visual layout to hint at the changes. Not that it matters to the Geometrical Dominator UFO, because it outright decided it won't even care. The layout of this segment is abysmal, because no matter what part of the music I decide to focus on, my UFO will crash. If I focus on the melody, I'll die to the second pyramid.
Say I follow the rhythm, I'll die to the first gateway formation.
If I follow the supporting melody, I'm not even sure it's intended, and I do in fact die.
The only recurring rhythm I see to this is the 3 taps in time with the first and the remaining music goes 100% ignored.
I will note this is easily solvable just extending a platform at the base of the first pyramid. Though the timing would still look stupid, at least it works.
Okay, since I only have the swing copter left to explain the ideal stuff, let me just briefly do this.
What the fuck's your deal, man? This is all made worse because the level's timing doesn't even know what to focus on. It randomly will change focus with no indicator, visual or musical. If a clear musical element appears and the level morphs to follow it, you have cooked. You've been successful. When you add something to queue into these changes, you're turbo cooking. Michelin's interested in an interview. But then this level just decides that you now focus on a backing melody or the main melody, but only with some orbs,
or a specific synthesizer that has been around for a bit, but now it's just important, I guess.
And this complete lack of any recurrent pattern makes the timing hard to grasp until you get used to it. You react almost exclusively to the visuals, which means the pattern aspect of the level is a complete failure. Insofar, it's failed on 3 of 4 pillars, with only the aesthetic one remaining, and I gotta say, these visuals are lovely. They have some cool colors and personality, but they are also geometrical dominating all over the entire everywhere. There's no cohesion to them. It really feels like a gallery showcase of the version's new decorations, and while the excitement is justified, the result is an unpleasant mess. Just what is the theme? Is it a dungeon? Sky dragons? Rainbow? Grass? And the sad part is this could have been made thematically cohesive if they just were linked together to imply some sort of story, like each of the motifs are a layer of the whole. Instead, we just get these disappointing random transitions and a pat on the back. So yeah, I believe Geometrical Dominator sucks, but thankfully, it's not the only level that sucks.
That's right, there is another.
One which I will put higher because its placement in the natural game progression renders it somewhat exempt from Pillar 4. Base after base is just not good. Although it does have a few musical and visual patterns, such as this part near the end where you get the same music phrase but one time you jump over spikes and another over a gap. A simple but efficient example of what I mean with patterns. The music timing is a little more there, it's still pretty mediocre and the fact that the song is very repetitive does not help, but in my objectiveness, I will look past my opinions on the NCS stock and electronic music. When you hear people talk about this level, you're either dreaming or at the loony bin, because it has nothing to teach, very few patterns to look for, non-memorability, and subpar visual personality. Even all levels would use colors and designs that would be reminiscent of them, but I can put a screenshot of some part of base after base and laugh at you for not realizing this is just a flip version of something from Tryout. The extremely rare occasion where this level does get discussion is revolving the fact that 2 of its 3 coins are some of the absolute worst game design I've seen in a hot minute, while the other one is just like sort of bad, I guess. Coin 1, simply drop here, and well, do nothing. It's easier to obtain than not to, but hey, at least it requires minimal focus. Coin 2, basically you decide to take a leap of faith, hopefully not by jumping to this random gap that gives no indication of being special whatsoever, alter up on an invisible coin, and skip enough to make the overall stage easier with the coin. And for 3, you hold here. Now that's what we call excellent game design and challenge escalation. Talking about coin 3, this ship segment is downright abysmal. It holds no challenge, it looks like nothing, and it requires virtually no input. Even without containing the easiest coin in the planet, it's still one of the most boring segments to analyze, so let's not. I hate that the level just sorta ends. So while I don't find it exceptionally painful like Dominator, the level is so uninteresting to play and analyze from a game design perspective that I can't help but feel like it doesn't deserve to go any higher. Like, oh look, there's a random music spike here, there, that's it, we're done, that's the analysis we're getting. But that's all the levels that I think are both bad and I'm willing to recognize as official. There are some spin-off levels that are terrible, but this video is only about the levels in the main game. So by contractual obligation, we must make clear that we are aware of the challenge and we think it's quite good, but refuse to acknowledge its existence in any formal capacity. From here on, I don't think the levels I'm talking about are bad. I simply think they are lacking in some ways or another. Like, the 20th best level is simply worse than the 19th best, and none of them suck as much as Geometrical Dominator. Sorry!
I will say, for as subjective as I'm trying to be with my ranking, it still revolves around communication, which means some people probably won't see issues with stuff I outright dislike, while others will agree wholeheartedly. Most likely because they have more important chores to do than analyzing some cube game or whatever. It's like my stupid color backgrounds, where regardless of your opinion, I've been using them for the last 4 years just because I think it looks cool, bruh. This is a way to ask all the younger people in the audience not to get angry when I say stereo madness, it's just not very exciting. That is not to say that it doesn't fit criteria 4 to a T. It teaches players the main gameplay mechanics almost perfectly with little confusing elements.
It's one of the older levels, which spells out what to do if you have a negative intuition stat, so you're likely to naturally catch onto the basic mechanics right away. Jump over spike, don't hit wall, don't hit ceiling, use your eyes to look at what's coming up a little. The slow pace of the level makes it less replayable than other easy levels like Back on Track. It's too tutorially in an unfun way. Many other platformers know how to make the first level fun while teaching the mechanics, and sadly Stereo Madness does the bare minimum to make the level fun. This is honestly expected and happens to many indie developers. It's really difficult to make a tutorial that is functional and fun. Getting your mechanic across clearly should be a larger priority than trying something more ambitious that misses the mark. Take the intro to the ship here. Robtop gives you enough time to figure out the mechanic, warns you about obstacles, but then he doesn't really have you use the ship in any meaningful way until the second segment. I like the ramp up in difficulty, but I do wish the first segment asked a little more of players to make sure they understand the mechanics basics. Compare the emptiness and unspecificity of that section to the introduction of the cubes. How it uses an easy challenge while you get the feel for it, then shows you different usages of the mechanic, different chains, different combos, brings in the disadvantages of using strategies like holding on every single staircase to also teach basic side rootability, and it later shows you the importance of precision through these triple spikes. I guess a good way to explain my complaint here is the word safe. This level's too safe, and while I understand why, it ultimately doesn't result in a level that's too shiny. This level's theme is just basic colors such as blue, pink, and red. It has a limited color palette, in part due to the restrictive 1.0 objects, but it ultimately works in favor of all but 2 of the initial release levels. I also want to shout out the third coin of this level. I think it goes kinda hard. When I call it the third worst, I really want to emphasize, I'm actually calling it the 20th best. Robs is not a genius of game design by any means, but credit where it's due, he made a solid base of levels that, despite presenting critical problems, really encompass the style, gameplay, and design of his game. Now, you may be having a little bit of an abrasive response to me putting Stereo Madness under Cycles, because Cycles is just this very universally hated level, and it is the next one on the list, but let me be straight. The reason why this happened is exclusively because Stereo Madness happens to be a necessary evil, because it has to teach the game mechanics. Technically, that means Cycles is a better level, and if you want to argue otherwise, you are free to use the comments. As for me, I created this criteria, and if we look at Stereo Madness from the eyes of this criteria beyond my personal preferences, because I prefer Stereo Madness personally, it's just worse than Cycles. It's a good tutorial, but not a good level. So genuine question, what the fuck is a Cycles? So Cycles is probably one of the first fan favorite of the worst GD level label, for evident reasons. Beyond feeling sluggish to play, the level is ugly as hell, which will sound counterintuitive when I say this is probably my favorite aspect of it. It's almost entirely purple, but what I think that defines its real personality is not the color, but the constant claustrophobic feeling. The level is generally spent on the blocks and objects, and I feel like that's a praiseworthy aspect that some people just ignore. What I will not praise is much of anything else. Firstly, the obstacles are a little repetitive, and its musical patterns are flimsy at best. This is probably because the song uses the same elements 5 times, which leads to Robtop having the player do the same actions 5 times as well. More variety could be implemented for sure. Observe this ball portion near the end, where a portal catches you and flips you immediately. I adore the feeling of this in-game. It established one of the reasons why the bell is one of my favorite game modes aside from my Secret Balls fanaticism. Almost every instance of gravity portals during this section follows suit, except one at the very end. They're all shamefully placed in the same way, with the same distance. It's basically the same obstacle when it easily could just not be. Though I must admit, the inclusion of a subtly similar obstacle near the start redeems this from complete eternal damnation. Talking about that one portal at the very end that is different, this showcases the second problem with the level, which is how it once again teaches a mechanic to the bare minimum extension. This is the only vertical gravity portal you encounter in the entire level, and it's such a basic mechanic that I genuinely wonder if the very end of the level was changed at some point only to include this. The other parts of the mechanic are also improperly introduced because the level is obsessed with this flat setup for the mechanic to be used. You are not properly seeing the extent of your abilities, made worse by the recurring sticking to the walls and ceiling of the level that makes it feel rather sluggish by default. I repeat, it's sufficient but not without its massive shortcomings. Musically, it maps many musical bits perfectly, but there is both a lack of variety and an inconsistency to the focus in the music. Those flat patterns are a violation of Pillar 2, and the overusage is a violation of Pillar 1. There are elements like these pointless strings of orbs that don't defy any of the pillars but are still relatively pointless. I wouldn't think the same if they showed up later into the level, but they just show up here and leave. Ultimately, Cycles is an okay level that blunders a lot of teaching its mechanics, has awkward designs and feels boring at times, but it isn't the worst of the worst, just short of it.
Talking about early levels that you think would be higher, Back on Track has some clean elements that are ultimately overshadowed by a complete misuse of the game's flow, and while it does adhere to the music, it holds absolutely zero patterns to show that aspect harmoniously. The cool thing about Back on Track is that the music is a pretty clear and constant phrase, being developed all throughout the song. It has no turns, but it keeps fundamentally shifting in some regard. This is a perfect song to show what I mean regarding patterns. Let's analyze how this level uses the end of the core melody, a sharp and higher pitched note, in the context of the level. No need to tap, 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 land, no need to tap, you're not even playing, don't tap, land, land, you're not even playing, land. I'd argue the last 4 of these are acceptable, given they all share an action to the same musical cue. You'd expect perhaps the second to last would be inconsistent, but it isn't because an earlier pad was mapped to a similar symbol in the percussion. The rest does not comment the music. It sings but holds no patterns. Counterpoint, there is an element being mapped during the second phase of the music that is mapped all but one time. Here's the time it isn't, and it makes sense as it lets players read what's coming up after the potentially disorienting jump pad. Notice, the fundamental action is the same. Jump on the first note, land on the second, but the action changes between the 2 loops of the phrase. The first one you jump upwards over a gap, mind one exception, and the second one you jump over a spike. It truly is a shame that the second half of the cube segment doesn't do this nearly as consistently. I find this part when the music actually changes particularly sad. You do the same input to the same visual pattern twice, however shortly after you get a random segment of jumps and no jumps for no apparent reason. Oh yes, this is the level at which some of these analyses are going to be. I mostly want to make myself clear on these 4 pillars I'm looking for, so you can try to make your own objective analysis at your leisure, and so we're not here all day. On to positives, I actually really dig how this level demonstrates jump pads. Level 1 made evident that jumping over 4 spikes is impossible, so the natural reaction is hoping this glowy thing on the ground makes it possible. Boom. Immediately information, further by letting the advantages of the mechanic's simplicity showcase how it links to other elements, like jumping after, ending a musical phrase, or being potentially harmful. I just wish it would use these trap jump pads a little more intelligently towards the end of the level. For the ship, I think this serves a better tutorial for the mechanic than what Stereo Madness does. It actually requires a tiny bit of attention and control, and by this point it's safe to say players can handle the mechanic, albeit not in all its glory. And continuing on the trend of levels in the first version that could be better, Jumper. You do be jumping? So that's like real? You know how you get back on track with Back on Track, you dash and dash, you can't let go of the game and can't let go? Well, you become the jumper in Jumper, and I think that's art. That said, I wouldn't like to be dried out or dry out, and any process blast would be better at a distance, though I must admit the geometrical dominator intrigues me a little. While Jumper once again displays similar issues with the lack of patterns and occasional syncing mishaps, the only cue portion that I feel is great starts at 94%, and even then it feels like the music sings to some very specific elements that you can only properly hear with headphones. I love the way this level is built, with the jumpy block layouts and portals that are not only making for smooth transitions, but are placed at fantastic spots in the music. It really starts to show how well made these levels are for a guy who has little to no experience in game design. As an introduction to the inverse ship, I feel the same way I do towards cycles. It's not innovative or even really challenging, but it is sufficient. First, an open area for you to get a feel, later a few obstacles and even a coin that you can get if you learn to straight fly even with a new handicap. I also like how the level feels like a development of stuff you've already learned in prior levels rather than an exclusively thing to itself. And while I understand that fast shifts between jumping and not jumping was the theme of the level, I sorta hate that it doesn't introduce any consistent pattern to keep an eye on. Next on the chopping block is the first level featured here to come from an update that added a handful of things, and thus the level is designed around them, and unlike Cycles and Dominator, the decorations made for it are subtle but recognizable. They are simple and clean. Theory of everything. Number 1, you think the first one would be better given it got a critically acclaimed sequel, but I guess DreamWorks was probably somehow related, otherwise I can't explain why the sequel's so banger. Not you, Megamind! This level actually has decent sync with the music, just another example of lacking patterns, where the jumping is nothing impressive, but I can't deny the orbs work perfectly with the music and have a pattern, with most of them coming in duets except for these triplets that clearly map to the melody, though I wish the duet right after followed suit. I outright dislike this iconic part around 40%, where you get the same pattern 3 times, yet you're supposed to ignore it the 3rd time despite the fact that there is no musical tell to the fact. You can see that you'll die if you use this orb, but this fake out is horribly set up and is a monumental perversion of Pillar 2. This is one of the reasons why this stage is around the bottom. The other critical flaw I notice is these off-putting UFO segments, as they introduce a game mode but also rely on a pick-a-path gimmick that, by design, will often require player and creator to ignore the music. It's not a blind pick-a-path at least, but the lack of sync bothers me, because the UFO is a game mode that is very well suited for percussion and short musical bursts of similar pitch. The musical structure of Toei clearly leads itself to both of these usages being introduced, and yet the result is, follow the arrows and up quickly through the narrow corridors. The only part that actually feels like proper UFO gameplay is this mini UFO, which is alright though, again, not very well synced. On the topic of horribly narrow corridors, I know of at least one that truly embodies the worst of Robtop's gameplay. Indeed, the infamous ship segment from Decklock is here, and it makes me so happy to know that this is the only portion of the level that is half an insult to at least 10 societies, for needless to explain reasons. Because the rest of it is dandy. I love how much of this level syncs up with the music, though I once again like more patterns as well as some return to both this brief mechanic with the red platforms during the ball segment and these blue orbs placed on the ground, because these two mechanics can totally be expanded upon, and it's a shame they only appear briefly. And easily, any day, change a number of UFO segments that require some slight memorization to harder extensions of these mechanics. While the wave segment can feel a little stale, particularly for my skill issued ass playing on mobile, I do find their musical timing and correlating pattern very consistent. The green orbs at the start being thought and sticking to the wah 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 is really clever, and it lets you get a feel for the orb efficiently while keeping it fun. And on the matter of Pillar Force, the teleporting portals are also swiftly and efficiently introduced here. You have no choice but to go into them, and their functionality is very evident, as well as ramping in difficulty as the level goes on. Shoutouts in particular to this ball segment at 36%. If something about them I don't like is the ship segment with the fake exit portals. Like, okay, the first one is like, oh cool, surprise, I wonder which one I'll spit out of. It doesn't matter because I'll just have to keep straight flying and I'll be okay. And also, you probably have to practice this 17 times, so, like... And then the next one's all like, whoa. What's the thought process here, Robs? You're just using these as decorations and you can't assimilate otherwise. The oscillation of the ship segment isn't very good. I don't really like this part, much to Robtop's dismay. Besides that, I do enjoy the visual themes between the properly established block palette and consistent use of certain colors, perhaps furthered slightly by my icon colors following suit, but even beyond that, it's just a great looking level. I guess we are far enough into the video that I explain what I mean by the oscillation, huh? Okay, so Xtem's positioning went up exclusively because the ship segment perfectly describes this concept. Gorgeously! If you ignore the fact that you can just straight fly through. Like, I understand it's made this way because asking for the precision drop was implying through this path he made out of stars was a little too tricky for the level he was building, but the result is a perfect example being sort of ruined. Here, take a look and listen. Notice how the note stepping higher or lower is used in tandem with the ship when I deliberately try to follow the music. Aside from this, I really like that one of the potential punishments for failing here is survivable if you adapt quickly enough. The blue pads work exquisitely here. Too bad there's not a good introduction to the mechanic before, which sorta sucks for Pillar 4 because it's just like, whoa, replace these two portals with the pads and it works neatly. Okay, did some extra changes, but still, took me 4 minutes. You can also just use a blue orb and let players intuit they work the same way from the color alone, only that requires a little bit more effort to fix, so, you know. I'd also like it if the coin here was obtained by changing segments upside down instead, but everyone and their mothers should know that by now. Okay, I don't know how many of your mothers can actually beat X-Step, so forget I said anything. Here comes the praise train! 1. Using the same synth on every gravity change is genius. 2. The fake orb in the first bell section is at a spot without a musical element, so skipping it is endorsed by the music, and this is how it should be done every single time. 3. Robtop forced players here to fall through the ground, introducing false walls but not asking the player to be mindful of them, thus allowing himself to bypass teaching the mechanic later and letting another facet of it, beyond its existence, take over when the time eventually comes. Number 4. The second ball segment is so damn fun, and I like that you do the thing with the portals automatically, but with the orbs. Which, mind you, this is the first blue orb you see, and the first blue orb chain as well, which teaches you both of these mechanics in one throw, though I do wonder how intuitive it is. I just couldn't figure out how much intuitive it is. I actually don't know. Train over! The last ship is boring! As for aesthetics, same thing as with Toe 1. I need to see a podiatrist about this ingrown nail so I can properly appreciate the gravity mechanic being built into the level's design, the puffy bolts that are a specific and creative usage of an object, and the plethora of wavy! Overall, an acceptable stage with some very smart stuff, but a few notable blunders on the introduction to new mechanics, keeping it from getting too high. Give it up for Electroman Adventures! Come on, give it up. Give me your wallet. Give me your wallet, I don't have all day. A level I feel is fantastic, and yet it found its way all the way to 13th, somehow. But with my prescriptive notes being this great, what would you expect? Because I wrote, mention secret coins, rest is good and fun.
I wrote good with a U. Okay, you also mentioned a bit about how I can tell the secret coins are placed as part of the design for the first time in this level, and while some comments from before were pretty good to find, this level actually has a coin that makes me go, ooh, spicy! And then to combat the spicy, I drink my tears after missing the first secret coin in Deadlock when I initially beat it, and that's how I stopped my burn from tongue, whatever. The other two coins are fine, but like, really, what's going on with coin 3? Do we hate Extra Challenge now? Electro Man Adventures is just a fun, fast-paced song, so of course the level sort of follows suit. The name playing of the theme, with these Tesla coil-looking decorations and glassy block palettes that can be comparable to glass fiber cables, placing your icon in the position of electricity moving to a wire. You are the Electro Man, unless you think Kraftwerk are the Electro Man, to which I couldn't say you'd be wrong. This might actually kind of be like a better tutorial to the UFO, in a strange way. It feels more representative of how UFO gameplay should be created at the most basic level, with different layouts and a focus on the song's ever-going rhythm. I like the elements and everything, so I guess I focus on the two negatives. One is how glass blocks are introduced at the start but not used, the other is often the ignored music, as is with many of these levels. There's this big synth chord that the level reacts to half the time and doesn't have anything going on for the other half, which really stands out as the musical elements all sorta immediately take a backseat just so it can shine. Notice here, the first one has an input, the second one doesn't, and the third one has a counterintuitive purple orb, yet the rest of the instances of the player jumping in some way as it should be. Counterintuitiveness is a V's, but let me show you something that's on a completely different level. I think this here is the worst thing that Rob has put on a level. Even looking beyond the memes, it's awful. Look, that's just a solid level past its sneak peek space, but it still includes this part that masterpieces have been created in the past. And this is not that. At most, this is a masterpiece or a piece of shit. Seriously, the single segment of the level just kinda slaps you across the face with the most senseless and illogical stuff you've ever seen. Well, I say C with an asterisk because this really isn't psycho.
Approximately 10 hours later.
The mechanic isn't even one the level fails to establish. You can easily do this.
346 minutes later.
This is particularly lame because the mechanic would be properly introduced if it was just a normal spider segment that used this in a less aggressive.
The next.
Also, why is there a ball portal here? It makes no sense, you got the gravity. You're selling millions of copies. You're afraid of the random Twitter drama over a level being legendary or not, but oh, I guess you didn't spawn some sort of terrible eldritch nightmare with whatever this is. And this mess piggybacks all throughout the first 17% of the level, with blocks you can now hit for some reason, these green platforms that get no other usage in the level, potions that replace portals only twice while going against everything the game has taught you for the past 21 levels, and it's all done just okay enough to not feel scrappy. That or having the spider segment to compare just makes it seem like Robtop can get away with anything he wants, like fuck it, now this level's congregation. And then past this mark, it's all just smooth sailing. Perhaps Pillar 2 isn't respected to perfection, only patterns I can find are at the very last cube segment, and the fact that all the swing-copter sequences look kinda sorta similar, which, I mean, the fact that you don't really need to do any crazy swing-copter stuff and you can just follow the path, I think it works fine as an introduction to the copter. It's more logical than prior fighting game mode's introductions, but I still have no idea how the swing-copter is supposed to work ideally, something that the other ones didn't really give me. Maybe the swing-copter just works like this, because it's just not a game mode that has much practical use. You do get a brief area to get the feel for it, where you can occasionally rest, and then every other usage is just the standard motion of the game mode, except for the secret coin, which, can we just please make this visible, Robtop? This did not need to be like a hidden wall. I noticed the difference thing in one of these spots. It's stupid. The only flying game mode I feel got a better introduction is still a bit off, and you can already guess which it is if you make the count, but yeah. For all of you who toughed out several hits, I'm about to deliver another. Fingerbang is next. While other levels before this one I put down over an outright stab wound, Fingerbang's throwbacks are just a bunch of slashes, like a dozen mistakes using a kitchen knife. And if you think I sound too violent, I'm about to pass the threshold by mentioning Pokemon, the most violent of videos. It's a good bunny. It's a good bunny. You are. So let's start with the theme, Fire and Rocks. Look, I know I bashed Geometrical Dominator for being too barred and senseless, but Fingerbang goes the complete opposite way by having absolutely no variation besides this robot segment that I think has a genuine fight-tastic gameplay. You can compare that to the web segment, which I don't quite understand or like. They do time the music in a very evident pattern, but this design doesn't inspire any real emotion. It's just a standard zigzaggy path that is definitely one of the layouts of all time, along this random UFO segment that that also exists. Some of the mapping for the cube can be a little weird, but ultimately I like how clever it generally is. I enjoy how the first musical phrase's inputs are almost directly inverted on the second repeat, despite a part that remains the exact same because consistency is kinda nice. I like that the sample of the songs is Baguette. I like how the level's timing works well with the music because both never switch musical focus too fast, so even if patterns aren't perfect or sometimes break, the level manages itself greatly. My real praise goes to the timing with the spider, which besides being tight and clean, is also a great lesson on the mode for dummies. One quirk custom levels have all the time is how the spider segments just look like bold segments, so it's not immediately obvious, it's hard to sight read. Not double the problem for players that don't even know what the spider does in the first place. However, the game mode is cleverly introduced using a layout that you'd recognize from the ball segment in this case, which is really clever. You tap and you are hard pressed not to notice the difference. And then soon after, actual walls are used to illustrate the movement in a way that is clear to read, making me wish more custom stages would follow this, because it's a lot more readable and works extremely well. If I had a complaint here, is the lack of any elevation during the segment. This ending bit is just a prime example for a space where you can showcase how it teleports you to the nearest platform upwards rather than at a specific height, which isn't exactly all necessary, you can intuit it, but it still would be nice to have this little detail. It would probably make the level a tiny bit more fun. What surprises me most here, however, is the perfect placement of this coin. Just look at this. Hey, you see this, you do this, it's challenging and unique, you barely follow a different interpretation of the music as inputs, it's just... Unrelated, but go follow me on Twitter. I never mentioned that I have a Twitter of videos, which means most people don't follow me there, and I guess I should start doing that because, you know, I don't want to be followed up by bot accounts. Anyways, my problem with this level is this beautiful thing right here, because it's like here, and you look at it, and it's like so smart, but also so stupid and wrong at the same time. Can you tell me what the difference between these two orbs is? As a seasoned player, you know the green dashes drop you downwards, while the pink ones change your gravity upwards. It's similar to how these blue and yellow portals work. Now, if I was real stupid, I'd complain about the colors, but I'm smart and my complaint comes from these two beautiful setups right here. You see, the mechanic with the dash orb involves players being capable of choosing when to stop holding to end the dash. The level creator, however, has the nice tool here that they can use to force the dash to stop for the sake of improving player experience and stuff. There is no tell for this block. So Robtop decided to use the portals to signify the forceful end of the dashing, which is actually terrific design. Players now know something will happen when they reach the portal, but it brought along a trade-off with it, making the functionality of these orbs turn murky to comprehend. You gotta wonder, was it the orb that changed your gravity or was it the portals? Now you may be recalling this other orb earlier if you think you're a smarty pants, but lo and behold, you can just hold through it. Regardless of it, you may get the impression that you changed gravity because of the portals and not because of the orbs, which is just not correct. Yes, you'd figure it out after a while, but the design of this is just mismanaged. This sucks because the idea of putting some detail that hints towards the endpoint is fantastic. Alas, I must end this rant out of respect for the finger bangers, who are about to get angry when I imply dry out is better. I think dry out's virtues as a decent level are more than evident, to the point where the two people I asked about their ranking as well as my own ranking before analyzing the levels all had it at the 11th place, and it just stayed there as I analyzed the level. You might be confused because this is number 10, but pretend I didn't move a level down while writing the script. It just does all my criteria well enough this level, despite a few interruptions from an established pattern during the later half of the stage. Good iteration on a visual musical pattern at the start, an amazing first upside down segment that introduces the mechanic while being properly mapped. Notice how the big jump and landing happen on the same notes, and there's even a coin that retroactively fixes a jump that broke the pattern previously. My biggest grip is taken by the ship segment, where Rob just put some big blocks. Although what I mentioned about the oscillator still applies, it's just kind of uncreative. Weighing up Hexagon Force's first ship segment to it, look at how dynamic this looks. Look at those advantageous slopes that actually make your momentum react. It's just exquisite. Last time hexes were this good was when the hex girls conditioned me into wanting god girls. What's harder, them or the 50% segment of Hexagon Force? As a tutorial to Rams, Hexagon Force is hunky-dory. It introduces them in an area where you don't interact with them, then forces you to notice how they affect your momentum. But this last example where you have to tap on this ramp to notice how it also affects your jump, misses the mark by not providing any indicator like the previous slopes do. As a tutorial to the dual, I wish it bothered to use it less aesthetically. Well, yes, there's examples of the dual's synchronicity being used. It's limited to 3, with the other uses being symmetrical just cause it looks badass, I guess. I blame for this in part that the dual game mode just isn't that exciting or
unusable for many situations. You need to get creative, and at that point readability and functionality may have to be sacrificed. As a level with many orbs, it actually goes hard in mapping the orbs appropriately. They show patterns, sync with the music, but the stam one at 84% that would perfectly fit with the music and prior established patterns makes me evaluate my possibilities of survival inside a sealed chamber of chalky milk with a small hole at the top. Can I drink enough to make a small pocket of air to breathe through? Is it a better idea not to drink so I can reach the hole and use that to obtain my oxygen? And is anyone willing to hire me as a director for a soul film directed at the 7+ crowd? Okay, but that joke aside, this level is practically the definition of neutral good, so I don't have to overanalyze it that much. It has some problems adhering to the music and the patterns, but overall I think it's pretty neat, and I don't have to say that many things because it's just sort of evident from looking at it. I also want to briefly mention that I do like how many game mode changes there are on this level, because that makes it go by super quickly as like a perspective thing. As a level called Hexagon Force, you'd be thrilled to learn this contains more octagonal obstacles than hexagonal ones. Though hexagons having slopes is a sublime justification for the song choice that isn't lost on me at all. That's actually clever. It's not pronounced Toe-2, it's pronounced Toohoo. I have to admit, subjectively, Theory of Everything 2 is one of the best stages because the music is just baller, and I don't just say this because the composer is also called Nate. I genuinely think this is the best song in the default GT soundtrack. However, we must go back to Objective Land to talk about this level, because that's like the point of the video. This level is sort of an exception because it does pillars 1, 3, and 4 splendidly, but the lack of visual patterns is pretty evident. I also dislike the sheer quantity of fake orbs that land on the music. They are very common and they really stand out considering prior levels use morbs properly. Can we normalize calling mock orbs morbs? Like, you get this cube segment before the ship section that gives you PTSD flashbacks. This is incredibly good. Then you get this other one at 28%, and it's a very well timed with the music, but it presents no single pattern of any kind. Now, when we speak about Toe-2, we must discuss the ship and UFO segments, because they are the crux of the level's difficulty and personality. There's a bunch of wave that is fine, but those segments aren't as fun or impressive, except for this coin. His coin's also Observe how Robtop used the look of the UFO segments to communicate what sort of musical elements he'll be following. Narrow pathways, with not a lot of space for experimentation, will have you following the melody, even if unwittingly. Then these more open areas give you the freedom to be less precise while hinting at some ideal movements being done to the beat. Though this might be helped by several of the notes landing exactly on the drums to make up a hybrid feeling section, and I couldn't entirely get through it on the beat alone, but with the help of the melody, timing sort of works. I know I mentioned fun more than once, but what is fun? Because it's more of an abstract concept and not one of my pillars, and I neglected to really mention it until now. Game designers have honestly too many methods to define fun, because video games as a medium are a fascinating dopamine production machine. Dopamine is a compelling hormone your brain produces when learning something that later got some form of practical use, whether it's me calling back to how the deadlocked memorization chip segment is now insulting an 11th society, or noticing an improvement in a skill, including the skill of playing in a specific game. So a Geometry Dash level that is fun should consistently let the player learn while keeping the stuff they already know fun. If you can do a segment but just barely, then becoming better at it should release dopamine. And your ability to couch what mistake you made can help you develop a flow where you learn and play on a loop. Theory of Everything's 2 design is so orderly that for most mess-ups, you know exactly what you did wrong, and it's relatively easy to fix. So you can achieve this flow state of recurring dopamine hits for most of your playtime with it. This is particularly awesome because the level's main mechanic is a bunch of invisible stuff, which also works for thematic cohesion. These invisible segments are lenient enough to let players figure out their own strategy, something which doesn't happen as often with normal ship segments because you can't see a clear through line. That's fun. Take it as Sacred Pillar number 5, but I will not tally it up because fun can be oftentimes subjective, and I have decided to really limit how much I gauge it for ranking these levels. I think I've gone too far into objectiveness. I can no longer say subjectiveness. Fuck! Last second note, I like that most of the decoration is based on your player colors because it makes the level look different for everybody. Also, you know, Pillar 4, hooray. Alright, let's do Poltergeist. Again, not an example of perfection, some patterns are broken near the 75% mark, and the level ends 2 notes earlier than it should for some reason, but that should encompass all the negatives I have for this stage. It seems like the more obvious the pattern, the less likely it is to break, such is the case for these cool phrase ends that use a different layout with the same input, or the piano melodies that are timed to downward staircases. I love the big arcadey hit that is mapped to several paths or orbs, and even when you think the pattern will break, subtle differences in the music exist to reveal it's all correctly visualized and created. I also love it as an orb tutorial, starting from the blue and green shades that work well with the orb's own yellow coloring that visually complement the mighty tasteful gameplay, introducing the mechanic and keeping the difficulty and its applications on the rise while
showing the different ways you might find them. Alone, as part of a setup, in multiples, in sneaky traps to punish you for not listening to the music, which we should start calling more orbs. This is a stage that surprises me every time because the more I analyze it, the more I realize it's closely one-to-one with my design ideals, and when I find something that doesn't go with them, I can reverse engineer the exact reason why it is this way with 2 or 3 exceptions max. Clutterfunk is probably a controversial pick at 6th place, and you can thank that to this small ball segment. The way the heavy whooms across the ball raises or falls is spectacular music sync. I love how this 3-orb combo is the same input as this, completely different looking area, same click pattern but different look and feel. Are those early jump indicators? No, let's see here. What is people's problem with this level? Oh, these 2 jumps. 2 jumps are responsible for thousands, thinking this level involves a lot of memorization? 2 blind jumps, where one indicates a long wait and the second is both visible and mapped to a musical element where you clicked to a moment earlier?
Oh, Buzz, look at Where? Buzz, look at
What are you talking about?
Do not make me laugh. The real goals with Clutterfunk are a few lacking patterns, and that's very few considering the end of the stage is this concept in all of its splendor. The new decoration and dark mini corridors make its personality immediately apparent, and these mini sections are also fantastically timed and set to introduce the game mode, going steadily and shrinking decorations to help players adapt to the size, further showing it works with other game modes. First the ball, where the gameplay is similar without the modifier, and then the ship, where some real changes show. Notice how during the ship part, you can stop holding on a specific part of the music consistently? Everybody claps at the finger bangers, but nobody ever says yo what up to the Clutterfuckers. I've been advised to say something about the theme, so... wow, that's a lot of sauce, which are really all the level needs. And judging by how positive I sounded from that, you can bet the remaining 5 levels are full on incredible. There's legendary rated levels that wish they had this quality of gameplay and understanding of the game's virtues as a rhythm platformer. Beginning at the 5th best, Clubstep. Just the first 20 seconds show a level of mastery towards all 4 of my pillars. The music's bass and main melody are being followed here, with a very similar tap pattern throughout that is never once repeated in the visual department, unless it works towards teaching you a mechanic that the level will focus on, such as the chained orbs, or the deciming blocks that are trying to confuse you. And this is all whilst dangerous souls and monsters are trying to eat you. Well, they aren't trying to eat you, but you know, the theme is, they are supposed to be trying to eat you. And then as the song fades out, the blocks become invisible and difficult to read, yet you can rely on the established pattern to guide you through the dark, as even the bass too fades into the background, beguiling the attention of your eyes and ears. The one time this breaks, a coin that is accessed by following a melody segment that perfectly lines up with the bass, transitioning between the two in a gameplay musical parallel. And the whole level's just like this! Fun ship segments that can be learned via straightforward or careful movement that will more often than not sync to the music's pitch, with added challenge from the small ship gradually changing gravity more often and in harder to manage ways, more widely, which also fits in with the music. UFO segments that require accuracy and focus on the melodic elements that land square on the beat. The last coin is placed at the only spot with fake walls you don't have to follow, but it's akin to a final exam of what the level has shown you about these fake walls so far, so it's pretty nice. So with all this praise, how come 4 other levels are higher? Simply put, paper cuts. From now on, levels have nothing more than paper cuts. In this case, this blue morb at 40% lands perfectly on the music after 2 prior examples of it being true, morb at 60%, the second coin challenge isn't bigger than the standard part, morbs at 83%, the invisible pad at 94% is stupid and mistimed, and finally we live in a capitalist society and that downs on me every day. Which, now that I think about it, that's not a paper cut, that's more like a fatal gash. And also a really good segue into me telling you to support me on Patreon. Okay, fine, I'll stop blaming Clubstep for all of society's problems. Let's instead talk about how blast processing manages to be a better level than Clubstep. How about we start with how the first mistake in this level appears 56 seconds in. When you get this UFO looking segment with the wave as the music drastically changes. Almost like a portal from here has gone missing. And then that's it. That's everything wrong I could find with this level. Well, to the better. This level also introduces the wave, and it's by far the best flying game mode introduction in all of Geometry Dash. You may have noticed there's 2 more portals that I haven't talked about their introduction levels, but this tutorial here rocks in its own right. As you know, flying game modes let you go very high, so when you enter this portal and diagonally fly down with an evident trail recording your trajectory behind you, you'll naturally hold due to all the empty space above, the same way you do with the UFO and ship segments. Players will rise up past this pyramid following the exact shape, which in a matter of seconds just cued them into the game mode's functionality. And here's the finisher. Unlike prior introductions that only show the mechanic, this one goes a step further by showing you how it can work with the music, using the musical change regardless of pitch to signify whether you should start or stop, with these short guitar strums being accompanied by straightaways displaying the straight flight method for the mode. And just like that, they showed— whoa, what's this? It's the same but dual, and you can even take a risk for a coin. Wow, it's almost like a mastery test for a mechanic that was added into the stage at the same difficulty of the overall level. Incredible!
For clever usage of the music, look at how the bwamp is consistently mapped throughout the level as a single spike jump. It's very simple, but also very effective. I love that, unlike his future attempts, Robtop figured out here how to cohesively showcase all of his new editor tools, even ignoring the custom sauce that have now become cogwheels or the different mechanical elements that fit the music splendidly, elements that were specifically made for this level. These 3D illusions bring depth and creativity to any level, but this is a prime example of Rob using them for the team's advantage. And if you don't like your banana split simple, they even top it off with the sweet cherry of an edited song to finish on "You win" instead of on "fight." The next two stages I'll name drop will make many people angry, but at least this first one will only make the sillier part of those many people angry, so the rest of you can rest easy for the next 2 minutes. And I don't think it's criminal to say Can't Let Go is the best of the initial stages by a considerable margin. This level actually has a plethora of patterns, both visual and musical, that are being respected throughout, and you may think the visual theme is an issue, but most of the level happens over this pink backdrop or a black and white void, which lets you concentrate on the blocks placed around, as well as being somewhat memorable. This level has 3 primary structures: these dropping staircases timed to the brief falling notes, this precise jump pattern with an overhead spike and one in front of the jump spot, and these cube arrangements that can be best described by this funny emote I wrote on the script. The great part about these elements is their evolution. After the second half of this ship segment, which is at fault for this being at 4th place and not higher, you get this slightly lengthy sequence that combines those 3 patterns into several creative configurations. It truly feels like a development of these mechanics being mixed and matched to really test your understanding of the elements that became introduced as the level goes on, thanks to it keeping the pattern consistent. This is a perfect escalation that not many other levels in the game managed to pull off. Now if only the third coin wasn't the worst thing in the planet. And here's probably the most controversial part of this video, related to mostly making fun of people who have a serious skill issue with timing the cube. This level at 2nd place, I was tempted to place it at 1st because it's almost just as good, to the extent I genuinely needed someone else to point out a real problem with this stage, until someone told me that one of the ship portals comes in slightly too early, and even then I could say these earlier levels used to always try finding space for players to see what game mode they changed to without relying on the portal. Doesn't mean it's better than not doing it, but at the same time, the design philosophy did remain consistent in that way. Besides that, every part of Time Machine is the masterpiece that the last 3 levels had in bits, but all throughout. From the elegant visuals built entirely out of the regular blocks being put in a simple unrecognizable arrangement, to the usage of triple spikes as an often seen obstacle to many people's dismay. This level contains elements from prior stages being used in forms so unassuming you'd hardly notice consciously, while using the hardest possible arrangement back then to ask for precision and mastery, with not a dash of memory involved, even muscle memory, except the ship flying because that one uses muscle memory by de facto. Heck, the triple spikes are even mushed together a tiny bit, so the jump is a little less demanding than it could be, so basically just stop complaining and become good at the game. Okay, so let's go down the list of praiseworthy things. The music timing, such as the main 5 to 8%, which are commonly book-ended by the gravity portals, are almost always appear by a certain scene sound, the background color and mirror portal transitioning being used to neatly change the stage's musical focus to the newly added elements, the ship segments being the first time Robert actually nailed the feel for the ship gameplay that I agree with from a design-only perspective, the first appearance of a clubstep monster, these jump pads that go along with the subtle electronic-sounding background synth, the sickishly splendid and perfect timing of the jumps in coordination with the music in the 57% segment, this jump-jump-drop pattern repeatedly being used and sneakingly being altered when new musical elements influence the mix, and the way the rest of the level continues working with all of the previously established patterns and mechanics in faster and smarter ways, like, for example, the mirror portals start appearing more often as the level goes on. People hate mirror portals, understandably, because sometimes they are used in weird ways and other players flow off with more detailed levels, but this is 1.1. Levels can only get so complex, and this new mechanic that simply changes your perspective on the game is impactful enough to garner the hate of thousands for the negligible magnitude of the mechanic. If you see any negatives that don't involve the coins, cause holy crap, Robs, did you experience any form of sitting in a giant microwave for 2 minutes while you put this here? If you have any negatives, comment them. I am certain I can find a reason why it's a justifiable decision, unless whatever your complaint is subjective, such as not liking the mirror portals, but that's subjective. We're here to be objective. We're here to be objective. This level is fire, and it's in the hole. There, I've done the 2.2 meme trifecta. And number 1, the peak of levels in Geometry Dash to ever be created is Dorabai Basic 10, which I'm sure will shock some of you at the realization that even Dorabai made a basic 9 cycles level clone. Wow. Okay, come on, you've been waiting for it unless you didn't pay that much attention, in which case I hope you progressed or slept very well and very much, but the number 1 level is Electrodynamics. Once again, another level whose biggest problem is that one uninteresting part with the ball.
while the rest is adjacent to glorious. I love how fast and fun this level is. Aided by the speed modifiers, this level presents a unique challenge since the start with the longer jumps provided by the speed shift. You get from the first set of 4 spikes and these jumpy structures that your jump goes further when you go faster in a direct but conscious way. You remember my complaint with Studio Madness? It's always been arranged for this introduction, except the fake spikes, those really feel unnecessary. That's interesting, right? I pointed out 2 negatives already, therefore this should be number 2. Well, allow me to explain. While this level has more paper cuts, it also does many of the other elements fantastically. Time Machine can get stale if the triple spike jump isn't mastered well. Now look to electrodynamics. The hardest aspect of it to manage are the wavy small ships, which are infinitely more fun to practice as their segments are dynamic with the gravity switches and the velocity change to triple speed strike a sense of unfamiliarity to players mitigated by the game modes behaving in predictable ways. My favorite part about these segments is how they match the music perfectly. Pitch up, shape up. The music raising and falling notes feel exactly how the level looks, and this extends to parts that are not even using those elements, such as this first UFO segment, which is just genius. Musically, the visual patterns are focused more on the ship segments than the cube segments, but even if the visual patterns are unamicable, the musical ones are, leading to a level where you must feel the pattern more often. Even then, the pattern fits closely to the beat, so it's impressively satisfying to feel. Another illustration of being able to keep a rhythm where you can modify it to fit the differences in the level and music. Another match that stands out palatably is the speed matching the pitch, or the game style changes signifying a shift with a primary melodic pattern, and then the smaller patterns that we're looking for in Pillar 2 are separated based on game mode, which is an ingenious way of pulling it off that I have never considered. Through little things like this, I think it edges past Time Machine in my objective scoring, in which both of these scored a 10. I also like the more bright and rave-inspired approach to the electronic theme, which had been done before with Electroman Adventures, but this one feels different. You know, there's glowing lights and more flashing colors, wavy and connected elements, swirls. They kind of build up a personality that can make you imagine different scenarios that fit the visuals here. Oh, I can see it clearly. This music, me, a hard-boiled egg which I will eat whole. And that is my list. You can comment yours in the comments if you manage to give me your own criteria for what you think is an objective look at this, because it's sort of interesting to analyze the game design from a perspective that is not my personal opinion. Now, usually I like winding down the videos with some cool message about how the state of affairs has changed or how inspirational it is to see that someone such as Robtop, without a giant team or any other crazy resources, managed to create a game with levels that resonate with players and sometimes show up bedazzling game design. So maybe any developers or even level creators out there could trust their own intuition for game design and let themselves create something regardless of how perfect or imperfect it could be without overthinking the process. Yes, you can be objective to figure out if something works or doesn't work, but honestly, when you create something, be subjective. You might be onto more than you think. In this case, I only gave you the footnotes because this was seriously intended to be a 20-minute video before I round my mouth yapping about a cube game where you just jump over a spike. And I want to save face for my followers who remember the days of 10-minute videos. Hey, at least we're done here. Oh, no. You are not telling me that Ultimate Destruction is anywhere near good. Step back! I know you're trying to gaslight me! Yeah, that's what I thought!